This one's wife. Unseen footage. Child rejects her. Hello, I'm H.G. Tudor. I've explained elsewhere about the dynamic between this one's wife and her own apparent children. That in effect, should you accept that they exist, she spends very little time with them. This, first of all, is evidenced by the fact that she's often away from them, going to Whistler, going to New York, going to Jamaica, going to Portugal, going to Dusseldorf, going to The Hague. She regularly spends time away with them, and, most recently, her attendance in Nigeria. Furthermore, as a mid-range narcissist, she presents a facade to the outside world that she's a kind and loving parent, and in actual fact, her behaviour demonstrates the contrary. In addition, behind closed doors, she'll allow others to take the strain. Motherhood does not come naturally to her because of the absence of empathic traits and emotional empathy. Furthermore, she's not somebody that actually even makes much of a pretense at it with regard to the interaction that she has with her children. This is why we see limited footage and photography of her interacting with the children. Whilst there'll be some of you that maintain that the children don't exist, and that's the reason why there is no film footage and photography, it's actually more likely the consequence of it's difficult for her to put out such material because she simply doesn't act in a maternal fashion with them. This is the problem that she has with her own children, and is exacerbated when she's involved with other children that aren't hers. We've seen footage in the past where children have been encouraged to go towards her. This was when she was a working royal, and they retreat from her as if they sense that there's something not quite right about her. The fact is, because she doesn't have any emotional empathy, she fails to give off a warmth that will necessarily attract children. Children are interesting in that regard when it comes to their interaction with narcissists. It's as if they can actually sense the emptiness, the cruelty, the lack of genuine behaviour in the narcissist, which causes them to be recalcitrant in engaging with them. Adults become complicated by the way that they see the world, and thus are much easier to draw in. But children are more difficult to manipulate in the sense of meeting a narcissist who is a stranger. It's different within the context of a skilled narcissist who is a parent and the manipulations they can use to control their child. But in relation to other people's children, the narcissist will often find it hard to control those individuals because the children can in effect sense that there's something not quite right about this person. They don't know what it is. The child doesn't think, oh, you're trying to make me hug a narcissist, mummy, I don't want to. But rather the mechanical nature of the way that the narcissist moves, the emptiness, the absence of genuine emotional empathy become more stark to the child. They look at things in a much more simplistic way compared to an adult. An adult is more likely to make excuses for behaviour, whereas the child does not. And here you're going to see another instance of where a child is entirely uncomfortable around this one's wife, but also you'll be able to watch the way that this one's wife behaves in relation to the child. Here comes the footage.
Can we go, please? I need some space, please, I need some space, okay?
Let's see the dress.
You will probably have seen the photograph of the gurning, manic-looking this one's wife stood next to the young girl holding a rose. However, this footage gives you more context and a wider view of what has gone on in relation to the interaction between the two. You'll see how the child is ushered towards engaging with this one's wife, that she is encouraged to have a photograph taken with her. You'll also see how she makes no eye contact with this one's wife as this one's wife hands her a rose, and then places an arm around her, asserting physical control over her. This one's wife also takes a rose and is looking around to ensure, of course, that the camera is upon her. She gives the rictus grin, staring at the camera, but the child is distinctly unimpressed. She doesn't want to be there. She continues to look down. This one's wife picks up on the fact that the child is not responding favourably towards her. Her narcissism recognises that this child, a non-intimate tertiary source, is proving to be a threat to control. That the child is demonstrating a lack of interest in this one's wife, isn't smiling, isn't looking at her, isn't reacting with the joy that this one's wife would expect from her. Accordingly, rather than attempt to continue to engage with the child in a way, for instance, the Princess of Wales would, and you will have seen various instances of the brilliant way she is with children, taking an interest in them, making them feel wanted, making them feel that she's interested in them because she genuinely is. This one's wife, it's all superficial. She attempts to assert control over the child for the purposes of a photo opportunity, putting her arm around her, dropping down to her height. But the child doesn't respond. She doesn't make eye contact. She looks down. She doesn't smile. All of those lack of responses are problematic for this one's wife, amounting to a threat to her control. But rather than persevere, her narcissism simply says, forget it, bail, get out of there. And thus you see this one's wife stand up and move away from the child. She doesn't continue to make any effort whatsoever with her. The narcissism essentially writes the child off. The child isn't giving us what we want, isn't providing us with adequate fuel, isn't succumbing to control, so let's forget about it. We're not getting what we want. And thus she stands up, looks around, laughs, then attempts to have a photograph taken with her again, but this time standing up. But any attempt at a meaningful interaction between this one's wife and this child fails. And this is because she has no natural way of dealing with children, and because she has no emotional empathy. It stands out a mile, and it isn't this one occasion that this has occurred. It has been the case on numerous occasions where children simply feel uncomfortable around her because they pick up on the absence of her emotional empathy and also the emptiness that flows from her. This one's wife's narcissism recognised that this particular appliance couldn't be controlled properly and it wasn't worth doing so. And furthermore, she doesn't have the ability, the charm, or the practice at controlling children because she hardly bothers with her own. Another example of how this one's wife fails to assert control over somebody, and how, yet again, another child rejects her. I'm H.G. Tudor. Thank you for watching.